This is short, nerdy nonfiction with Connlyn Sinclair. In this second season, it's going to be a more casual recording situation where I just kind of pull up my microphone and talk about interesting things that I might be thinking about over the course of the week and which might interest you. Today, I'm going to talk about an interesting thing that happened to me a few weeks ago. I was just kind of driving around and I stopped in this used video game store, and I'm not a gamer and I don't have the utmost respect for gaming culture. You can throw any tomatoes at me that you want. But I found a good amount of, I wouldn't call them classic anime, but they're older ADV titles that ADV dubbed in the early 2000s. And it was stuff that I remember seeing on the Anime Network, 15 years ago now, back when I was very young. That kind of, it was from the time period where I got into anime all those years ago. And I ended up with, it was Digicarrot and Wild Arms, Twilight Venom, and Nonica 617, and two very random discs of the old 2003 Full Metal Alchemist. And I thought, okay, well, they've got all this random stuff, and I'm kind of a collector of weird odds and ends. I've bought plenty of books and movies simply because it's kind of an odd thing to own. And so I bought these, and I thought, okay, well, I'll watch them. And over the course of the next few days, I watched them, and a lot of it I didn't remember. I'd seen all of them. I remember Digicarrot the least. And also, at 12, 11, Digicarrot is something that's kind of hard to grasp, that kind of absurdist Japanese slapstick. Certainly for a new anime fan, Digicarrot is hard to grasp, I think. The other two I don't think would be hard for beginners to grasp. I certainly think I grasped them back in the day. And I think I understood them just as well as an adult. I think Nonica 617 is an absolutely amazing romance anime, and it's kind of weird to think about it that way. Because it's such a gimmicky show. And because it's such a gimmicky show, the gimmick is that the love interest hits her head and loses all her memories since she was 6. And think, oh my god, this is horrible, this is, appealing to the worst type of anime fan. And then it doesn't. So that's the interesting thing, is that despite a premise that could easily be done as a completely fetishistic premise, it's actually a fairly well thought out drama. Because the general idea is that she was a horrible person at 17. And because she was a horrible person at 17 and she hits her head and is, gets amnesia going back to 6, that she gets to grow up again in the correct way. And you think, oh, it's still a romance. She's still a 6-year-old romancing a 17-year-old. But it's not, because the boyfriend is kind of stuck in the caretaker role. And I don't know much about age regression. I know there are fetishistic age regression people in real life. And I have friends, online friends, not people I know in person, who claim to be age regressors. But it's kind of a realistic thing. If your girlfriend hit her head and became a 6-year-old, you wouldn't think of her in romantic terms anymore. You'd think of yourself as a babysitter. And I think that's kind of the premise of the show. The romance doesn't really exist. It bills itself as a romance. But it's about growing up and the idea that you can grow up wrong or grow up right. And maybe that's a horrible idea for an anime, but it's interesting that it was done that way. And, Twilight Venom, Wild Arms Twilight Venom is an adaptation of Wild Arms, a video game that I've never played because I'm not a gamer, but is a Japanese space western. It's much more supernatural, magical than Trigun. Trigun is certainly a lot better, but Wild Arms is still very well done. And it has kind of the same format as Trigun. I mean, I guess you could actually see it very much as a Trigun ripoff, and I can see maybe why ADV did it at the time, because Funimation had Trigun, and so ADV did Wild Arms. They still do that. ADV is High Dive now, and High Dive is notorious for getting weird ripoffs of Crunchyroll titles. A lot of the times the High Dive title seems better to me, but that's just my own prejudice. But it's very much, it's an episodic, dramatic gunslinging show that's very much Trigun, but not Trigun. Not as good as Trigun, as I said, but it's still very good. And I only had one disc of Nautica 617, the second disc. I only had one disc of Twilight Venom, which is the first disc. So it's really just a snippet of these shows. And DigiCarrot only was, 16 shorts anyway, so it doesn't really matter that I only had one disc of DigiCarrot. But, watching all these back to back, you really start thinking about the early 2000s anime, especially the ADV dubs, and they do feel better. I don't think that's just a nostalgia thing. I think that the writing style in Japan, or at least the dubs, the translations of the Japanese material, was very different back then. It was much more focused on teen drama on the part of Nautica 617, or, family drama, personal drama. Most of the episodes of Wild Arms are about the main gunslinger character coming to town and finding, personal troubles with the inhabitants and having a shootout. And, I don't think everything these days is, the isekai of the month, and those are all horrible, obviously. And even the romance anime these days, a lot of them seem so gimmicky, and certainly Nautica 617 was gimmicky. But, stuff that's come out recently, The Girl I Like Forgot Her Glasses, or that one about the kid who moves to, oh my god, Okinawa, and he can't speak the same language as his girlfriend. I mean, that's just really gimmicky. And I liked both of those, but they're not as well written. And I don't know if, I think American TV has certainly gone downhill since then. And I don't watch a lot of American TV anymore. I really liked American TV of the same time period. CSI, Law & Order, Criminal Intent. You had The X-Files, Charm, the end of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. A lot of those were running at the same time, at the same moment that these anime were produced. And it was kind of a similar thing. The American shows were more interested in the characters. They were more interested in character development. These animes, I think, were more interested in character development. They were more interested in human stories. There was less of the gimmickry and less of the we gotta stay on theme. So it's a kind of an applicable thing that TV as a whole seems to be less about people these days and more about plots. And it's easy for someone like me who watches a majority of Japanese shows and English shows and Italian shows to think, oh, that's an American problem. And by watching foreign TV, I've escaped this American problem. But buying these old anime, I realize it's not an American problem. TV has changed. The storytelling conventions have changed. And there are modern anime that I have loved. I just finished Dan to Dan, and it's really good. It reminds me of a lot of classic stuff, though. It's still formatted very much in the way that I think Devilman back in the 70s was formatted. I think Dan to Dan is entirely just what Devilman would be if it was out today. And, yeah, there have been some decent modern anime. Licorice Recoil was good, Call of the Night. But they're still done in a format which is different. Storytelling conventions change. And so watching these old anime has really got me thinking about storytelling conventions and how they change and how they shift. And if you're watching something from the early 2000s, compare it to something today. If you're watching Charmed, or CSI, or Fullmetal Alchemist, or what else would pop back, like Naruto, think about that versus now. Think about your own opinion. Has it gotten better? Has it gotten worse? Or has change just change? Well, thank you for listening to me rant and rave, and I'll see you next week.